to the Holistic Diabetes Solution, the first summit of its kind ever, and we're so excited today. I'm Cheryl Ivaniski, Doctor of Holistic Medicine and Doctor of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture, helping serve people, health practitioners, naturopaths, and all of our energy healers so that we can help heal people with diabetes. Today, I'm very excited because I have a guest that's actually started in Montana, moved to Arizona, my favorite state in the United States, by the way. And Dr. Mona Morstein brings us her expertise, having 31 years, not just in practice, but in university teaching curriculum on faculty. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about that, but she has devoted her last 31 years to metabolic challenges, to those with prediabetes, type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and she has something very special, which is her 8 essentials. So I would love for you, Dr. Mona Morstein, to say hello to our audience.
Hello, Cheryl. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm really honored to be a part of your summit.
Well, thank you for accepting, because you know it's all the wonderful doctors, and I know that you're a naturopathic physician, and I would really love for our listeners and our audience to learn exactly what that means.
Well, a naturopathic physician is kind of in a one-sentence definition, generally a family practice physician, a GP, a primary healthcare practitioner, who is licensed in all of those ways, but has a philosophical and practical way of using integrative medicine in treating patients. And so patients usually come to us wanting to avoid surgery or maybe get off a medication or prevent having to get on one for any kind of illness. And while we do integrative testing, diet, diary, so many ways of analyzing patients and finding their imbalances. And by removing imbalances and causes, we can then help strengthen the body to heal.
I can't agree with you more. I totally agree with that. And I think that, so many professionals, as well as the general public, it's really good to know that as a naturopathic physician, you're trained with the traditional side of things as well as the naturopathic side of things. So it's not discounting anything, but it's integrating.
That's true. It's adding into and kind of finding that ability, what works best with each patient, with the focus being on the naturopathic way of working with patients as our primary, of course, interest in approaching patients and setting up protocols.
And that's what I'm so excited to talk with you about, because when we were speaking a little earlier, we were talking about, it was epidemic in proportion. It's now pandemic in proportion with diabetes worldwide. And when we were speaking, yes, it is 1 in 4 and actually 1 in 3.6 actually people, I think, that are being not just diagnosed with diabetes, but half of the world's population, of those nearly 427 million people, aren't even aware that they have pre-diabetes or diabetes. And that's a very scary statistic.
Yeah, there are, in certain countries in the world, there are higher levels of undiagnosed people with diabetes. Of course, there may not be the medical infrastructure that there is here in Western countries, that there are all over the world to be able to have people easily get their blood drawn and checked up and so forth. But there are many people, right now in America, there's about, say, 30 million patients with diabetes and about 100 million people, or not quite, maybe 90 or so, that have prediabetes. So right now we do have about 1 out of every 3 Americans have either prediabetes or diabetes. And that's as much of a crisis as we can say anything is. The
Yeah.
1 in 4 I was referring is senior citizens. 1 out of every 4 senior citizen, has diabetes, and it is a concern. Not just, diabetes really doesn't cause anything in anybody, but uncontrolled diabetes causes devastating consequences and also can lead to early premature deaths and mostly cardiovascular disease. So
Yes.
For everybody who's got a friend or a family member or themselves with diabetes, it's so important to get it under control. Then you can live the whole rest of your life doing everything you want to do with diabetes, right? So that's the focus, is really attaining that control.
So in your experience and in your practice with your patients and in your faculty at the university, what are the top 2 or 3 observations and solutions that you've noticed from a naturopathic and integrative approach that are really helping people get the control and the management of their blood sugar levels?
So we mentioned the 8 essentials. So this is a concept that we've created at the Low Carb Diabetes Association. That's an education nonprofit. It's at lowcarbdiabetes.org. And so these 8 essentials, which I also talk about in my book, Master Your Diabetes, that's diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, healing the gut microbiome, environmental detoxification, supplementation, and then medication. And out of all of the 7 essentials that have this kind of naturopathic, integrative, holistic, whichever term we're using, aspect to them, for sure, diet, exercise, are very key. It's interesting though, but environmental toxins are so problematic and so medically and scientifically associated with causing insulin resistance, which is the disease state of type 2 diabetes, and even causing obesity, which is also a premier etiological factor for developing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, that abdominal fat. And these chemicals, such as the pesticides that we spray and the herbicides that we spray, whether on our front lawn or on our foods source, these are truly, truly problematic chemicals in people's bodies that causes all kind of havoc. Changing the gut microbiome from antibiotics or bad diets or being on proton pump inhibitors. The gut microbiome, if it makes pro-inflammatory chemicals, because it got imbalanced, those pro-inflammatory chemicals can go through this gut lining and wind up at the cells and produce insulin resistance. So for sure, I think starting with diet and exercise, and of course exercise is oftentimes the least thing people want to start with, that, working then analyzing people, could it be that their health history has weakened their gut microbiome, or did they work did they work and get exposed to more chemicals, and we all just get exposed to just eating, drinking, and breathing in air. These are problems, as well as one of the last ones is supplements. Many people are very deficient nowadays, even in this country where we have all the food that we could want, but choices of food, nutrient content of foods has gone down in the last 50 years, and simple nutrients such as essential fatty acids, chromium, vanadium, zinc, magnesium. I mean, these are all nutrients that at the cellular level can help reduce insulin resistance and are very helpful in also preventing or treating a person with diabetes. So it's kind of, you said just 2 or 3, and obviously it's difficult for me to
your
really,
passion comes out. Your passion comes out, which is all great. Which is all great, because it's not that one's better than another. There's just so much.
There's so much.
There's
Even,
so much.
I mean, with sleep, if you've got sleep apnea, and many people, I just diagnosed a man who is at normal weight, but just had fatigue, and he has sleep apnea. And if that is not treated, that is an awesome way to get into blood sugar problems and insulin resistance. And it just leads directly almost into that, right? And
yes, and you know, that's a very good point. And thank you for mentioning it. I'm actually in a sleep study right now for people with diabetes, as a matter of fact. So the question is, does lack of sleep contribute to the cause? All right. Or does, you know, does sleep, not a good night's sleep, contribute to it? And, you know, it's interesting because, and I'll share the results with you. Would you like that?
Well, I know that there was a federal NHANES studies that showed if you get less than 5 hours of sleep a night, your risk for developing obesity raised 235%.
Absolutely. And I know even short term, like in less than 8 weeks, of people who didn't have that sleep, their sugars naturally went up. Almost immediately.
Within 2 or 3 days of sleep deprivation, they already see in young adult men their insulin resistance.
Yes, absolutely.
And let's face it, in our, you know, in regular people, but in aging people, sleep can start becoming more of a problem. Postmenopausal women tend to have problems with sleep. And people, as they get older, you know, we can start seeing where this 1 out of 4 population rate occurs if we're even just looking at sleep, and how we just start losing that perfect baby sleep that, you know, we have when we're younger.
Well, you know, our sleep is the time when our bodies are meant to repair and restore and revive. And, you know, when that's interrupted and our ability, you know, depreciates like a bank account from 100% down to very low levels, it's so, you know.
True. They've also measured that with lack of sleep, we elevate the hormone ghrelin, which causes us to have, it's like gluttony. We have more desire to eat and more carbohydrate foods, and we actually decrease the hormone leptin, which is the one that tells us, no, we're full, we're done, we don't need to eat so much. So we actually get into hormonal changes that promote overeating of foods that can have us potentially gain weight more and lose our appetite to move back from the table. So even, you know, on many different levels, that's why we made it one of the essentials, sleep, because it's so important to get those 7, 8 hours every night.
Well, is there a tip, a tool, or is there a strategy or a therapy that you recommend for people who might be having trouble sleeping? And so many people will say, well, I have to get up to go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And that's also often caused by elevated sugars and other things as well. But is there something that we could leave our listeners with that can help them, like, to, you know, add quality to their sleep and quality to the length of time that they're sleeping?
Well, I think we start generally with what's called sleep hygiene, which is basically, you know, around 8 o'clock, starting to turn all the lights off in the house, but for a lamp or two. So darkness enables us to make melatonin. Yes. And that is our sleep hormone. So if all the lights are on in your house, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, that could be blocking your melatonin. Also, of course, avoiding watching scary things or violent things on TV and new things that are disturbing, that it's not that easy to shake off. Yes. Also, of course, getting off the computer, getting off your phone, that blue light is very stimulating to the brain. Now you can say, oh, I'll use flux or I'll put amber glasses on. But in reality, just getting off of that, maybe opening up a book, having a very dark room. They say keep it cool, but I don't like it cool because I'm chilly when I sleep. So I like a warm room.
Oh, is that right? Because they do say a chilled room is better.
Yeah, I don't want that. I'm cold. But so you have to get the temperature where you need it to be. Now, the other thing is, like, don't stop drinking 3 hours before you go to bed.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense to keep drinking. Organize your fluid intake. You have a good, have it great when you wake up and maybe again around 4 o'clock. And so by dinner time, you don't have to be drinking a lot. So we're trying to contain the waking and urinating.
Right.
Or, of course, supplements or even hormones. Postmenopausal women, sometimes we need to give them a little extra progesterone. There are plenty of there's tryptophan and 5-HTP, valerian and hops and skullcap and passion flower and valerian, and melatonin and all different kind of things that, we have to pick and choose what might work best for each individual, L-theanine, whatever, these things. So those we can use to help if people are having problems falling asleep or waking and can't get back to sleep. I always recommend patients have a pad of paper and a pen on their night table. So if they're thinking, oh, I've got to do this or that, they can just write it down. They don't have to think about it anymore. It's written down. They won't forget it, and their mind can let it go. So these are little techniques that we're working with patients under that term of sleep hygiene. Another thing is also avoiding caffeine. Many people innately do not necessarily detox caffeine by the time you're in bed, or if you're having a little, you have it before 9 or 10, it still may be affecting you.
Yeah.
So caffeine is something also, of course, a diuretic as well. So all of and then the last one is, of course, avoiding alcohol at night, which does interfere with getting deep down into sleep, and therefore people can wake easier in the middle of the night.
Well, that's all really great information. I know that I was showing you some of my secret oils here earlier that I just love, the essential oils. Can you speak to that? Because I know that aromatherapy is something that you're very familiar with.
I don't, do too much. I know lavender oil has been shown to be anti-anxiety, can help with rest, but actually I'm not personally, I don't make a lot of use of essential oils myself with patients.
Well, that's a lot of great information, and I think that people really underestimate and probably don't spend the time looking at what the quality of sleep buys them, what that equity is in their health and their maintenance and that restoration. So this is really great, valuable information for people. And I know that for me as a thinker, ongoing thinker, and I always have my paper and my clipboard actually beside the bed, and I'm always writing. And sometimes you just want to turn that off. And the one thing that I know that has made a big difference for me is setting my clocks back 2 hours, because I'll stay up to whatever hour. But I have the discipline now of stopping at about 8:30, 8:45. And like you said, the lights, it's huge because you stay wired with all of our devices, our tablets, our iPads, our phones, our computers, our TVs, everything's electronics these days.
It's true. It's true.
So it's about unplugging and giving the body the rest that it needs. I know that when we were speaking earlier, I was really interested in not just your passion, but what a really great success story can be, or what it is, and so that our audience can really feel the impact that the integrative and natural approach and solutions have for people with diabetes. And I know that you were sharing a story of a patient with neuropathy Would you share that with our viewers?
Yeah, so when I was at the medical school, our student shift had an 82-year-old woman who had had diabetes for many years, and it had been not well controlled. Her had an A1C, which is a 3-month monitor of how well your blood sugar is controlled. And generally, we want it to be less than 6. And that's our best way to make sure we're having better control. But she was all the way up to 8.5, and she came in with a walker because she couldn't feel her feet or her legs from peripheral neuropathy, which is one of the possible side effects, complications of long-term uncontrolled diabetes, is damage to the nerves. So we put her on a low-carb diet. We put her on, got her on good supplements, a good multiple, fish oils. There's great supplements for people with diabetes that includes things like Gymnema or NAC or green tea or curcumin, benfotiamine, alpha lipoic acid,
Yes.
All
the good stuff.
Bilberry, all of these things. We gave her a snapshot of ones that she could take.
Yeah.
And work with her on doing some chair exercises, just getting her moving her body as she could. When she came back in a month, she had followed the diet and took the supplements, had been doing everything really well. And she came in using a cane. She no longer had to use her walker because she was getting the feeling back in her lower limbs. And even 2 months later, she came in just walking on her own. She could feel her legs. They had healed up. She had good nerve functioning. They weren't numb. They weren't tingling. Her blood sugars were significantly down at a lower A1C. I mean, it was just awesome to see that no matter how old we are, if we remove the obstacle to cures, get rid of her high carb diet, get rid of, she wasn't on any supplements, there was nothing really nourishing her, rebuilding her nutrient status. Her body just said, okay, my glucose is under control. Now I can heal this damage that had happened. And it was great for the students. It was great for the patient. And it's always great for me. I never get tired, of seeing patients healing and getting better. It's just every single patient, it's just as exciting as it was 31 years ago.
And, thank you so much. Your enthusiasm is in your speaking, and it's contagious, which is great because there are so many people, as we know, with so many complications, and they're on the rise with the more people getting diabetes. So it's very, very inspiring to hear success stories like this, because I think people do lose hope over time. I think they're very frustrated. And I think it's a really great time for this new awareness and this movement towards great self-care, the things that we can do for ourselves, but we need to know what they are. And so it's wonderful that with your 8 essentials, that's able to provide guidelines for individuals with diabetes, but also I think it's great for not just the prevention, but it's great when you're in that space and you don't think that there's anything, like you just think it's going to get worse, when in fact it can get better.
Well, I think that people think it's going to get worse because in the standard conventional paradigm, you get diabetes, and then over time it does get worse. And then, God forbid, you're having a heart attack or a stroke, because people with diabetes, because it's uncontrolled generally, have 4 to 6 times the risk of getting into a cardiovascular event. And so this is the way they start with one drug, metformin, and then after 3 years they're on a second drug, and then after another couple of years they're on a third, and then they need to go to insulin, and it is just this negative, very progressive way of experiencing diabetes. But in naturopathic medicine, with other integrative physicians, you can go backwards, you can stop it, it doesn't have to progress.
Right.
There are ways to work this very positively in the body and stop progression, improve the condition, and then the body can start healing up the complications, given they just haven't gotten just literally too completely far gone.
Right.
But you know, the body is amazing in its capacity to heal. And so we're always going to be very active and see just how much can it undo. But the key is first getting the blood sugars level, you know, getting them controlled.
Yes.
That's where the healing launches from. So
Yes.
things like a low carb diet, things like trying to get some exercise, things like supplements, things that really just work with the body in such positive ways in getting control. You know, it's so exciting to see patient by patient how it can come together so positively.
You know what, that's really great news. It's hopeful news. And I think that our viewers are really getting a lot of great value and information here. If there's one tip, and I know how passionate you are, so I'll extend that to two. Two tips that they can, you know, go out and start today. And when we say a low carb diet, you know, I know what that means and you know what that means, but for our listeners, maybe we could give them an example of what we mean for like a swap out, or the amount of teaspoons of sugar we might want them to have at a particular time that their body can handle and not be over-induced with, that suffocates in the blood cells. Yeah.
So, I mean, grams of carbs, I mean, in terms of refined sugar, you know, that's zero, right?
Yes.
But I don't think really anybody should be, you know, I'm not picking on people with diabetes. I mean, you know, refined sugar is just a poison.
Absolutely.
But in terms of grams of carbs, by low carb, generally the basic definition is, say, you know, less than 40, even less than 30 grams of carbohydrates a day.
Yes.
So this means the main group of foods that are being taken out are the grains, right? The rice, the breads, the pasta, also potatoes. However, the key in doing any kind of diet where we remove foods that people enjoy eating and is introducing them to the alternatives,
Yes.
such as using nut flours, cauliflower flours, coconut flours, and you make your bread and you make your pancakes and you make your, you know, your muffins, and we get these foods in, but in ways that work with the body to lower the blood sugar instead of just sending it through the roof, right? So we're looking at these kind of ideas as pulling out these carbohydrates and then teaching patients to use other kinds of foods that are really tasty and to give them new and exciting ways to experience food. In terms of sugars, again, I mean, certain things like stevia and monk fruit and chicory and xylitol and erythritol, or combination products like Purvia, Truvia, Lakanto, whatever.
Yeah.
These are all fine. But any kind of sugar, white sugar, brown sugar, agave, honey, maple syrup, you know, those have got to go. They got to go. We can't make use of them and attain any of the goals that we really want to attain to get glucose control.
And, you know, and thank you so much for giving those examples, because that gives tangibility to our listeners. And that's great, because often so many of us think, okay, so I'm going to focus on this area, or I'll focus on this meal. But really, you have to look at the whole body, because otherwise it's like a boat with holes in it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people get very put off by having things taken out. And so when we have a nutrition guidelines for patients, yes, we do have to mention what we have to take out, but there has to be the focus on everything that can be put in.
Yes.
Instead.
Yes.
And we've got to focus on that, or people just are not happy. And they just get into very narrow eating. Oh, protein and veggie. Well, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that gets pretty boring.
Yes, it does.
Burned out. So we've got to teach them and get them cookbooks and get them ways to make this low carb diet really very exciting. Like I put out a newsletter for the LCDA, and there's low carb smoothies and appetizers and breakfasts and soups and all different kind of things that we want to eat, and that can be done following this diet in ways that is very tasty and even family members wouldn't complain about.
No, and you can have fun, and it can be colorful, and it's, I know when I was swapping out like my zucchini noodles,
yeah,
and my butter squash nut noodles for pasta, and making my own sauces. You know what? The flavors are so amazing.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of learning. It's a matter of swapping out things slowly, not all at once, but slowly swapping things out and just getting to know. Because when we're cooking like that, it also doesn't take very long because you're so water dense, right? It's so water dense. But no, that's absolutely wonderful. And we also have a chef that's going to be sharing some fun recipes too. But can I ask you to share how people can find out more about these low carb recipes? Is there a website for the?
I mean, there are. I mean, if you honestly, if you just Google low carb recipes, they're everywhere.
Yes.
There's 23 insanely clever ways of using cauliflower, which is a pretty awesome recipes, making breadsticks and tortillas and bread, all kind of things from using cauliflower. But I mean, dietdoctor.com has ketogenic recipes, but if you literally just Google low carb, it's all over the place. And if you go to Amazon and Google low carb cookbook, you're going to get a bazillion of them. So there's so many people, we are not individually reinventing, the wheel. It's been invented. There are so many. You want pizza? There's awesome pizza crust, to make on a low carb diet. I mean, it's out there, and the resources are really great in that regard and so helpful, for patients and family members.
What I think I'm hearing, and I'm totally all about this, being from a very, very small town of less than a couple thousand people when I was growing up, in one stoplight, I think. So everything was local, everything was fresh, everything was organic. And I'm really hearing that really getting back to the basics of what the human frame and what the human system and what the human mind actually craves for and what it needs is what I'm hearing is the basics of nature.
Well, it is called a whole foods low carb diet for sure. Yeah. So not that we can't get some packaged foods, like Julian Bakery makes a granola, a low carb granola that a lot of my patients like. So it's not that all packaged food is bad. All right. It's just not, but a lot of it is.
Yes, a lot of it is.
You gotta pick and choose. But there are some convenient foods that people can have in their home. But we do know that preparing food at home is certainly the healthiest. Yeah. You're not dumping in everything that's dumped in factories and, in big name packaged foods. So it is a healthier diet for sure. But there are some processed foods that certainly peanut butter, you could say, is a processed food. It doesn't grow on the tree, already smushed up in a jar. But again, a pretty healthy processed food, right? So it's where when I go over, when I see a patient, my first office visit's an hour and a half, and that's just the intake. To find out all their health history, what's going on now, and to try to figure out, like out of the essentials, which ones are most pertinent to that individual. And then maybe we'll do some labs, and then they come back for the second treatment visit, and that is an hour long. And I go over my 8-page diet for diabetes, and we go over labs, and we discuss the exercise, and if they need stress management, or go over the supplements, and it all comes together. But having a handout where it's all explained makes it so easy for patients. And I have a reference sheet that has loads of websites that are usable for finding this. Or you really love, barbecue sauce? Well, guess what? You can't go to the store and buy it. It's all full of sugar. But there are websites that sell low carb barbecue sauce, right? So this, just handing people this information, I think really helps it from the get-go incorporate these changes into their diet. So it's much more usable and accessible and fun versus them having to figure everything out on their own.
And wondering if it's right.
Right.
Well, it's like, it's great because it's, the guesswork's not there. It's, this is what works. And so what's really wonderful about our time together today and all this great information for our listeners is that basically we're looking at the diagnosis with diabetes and the symptoms of prediabetes as the same as what they've been traditionally. But when we're looking at therapies and treatment options, we're looking at the healing from the inside out. And we're looking at how to give us high octane fuel and no diesel fuel, because we cannot perform with diesel fuel.
Well, I think, I guess, I haven't used that metaphor, but I know what you're talking about. Yes, it's trying to make it as easy. Diabetes is, in some people's minds, they can catastrophize this diagnosis because their grandmother had it and she lost her legs and then died, or some horrific past history of diabetes happened to someone they knew, and now they've got this condition. And so the key is to uncatastrophize it and let people know there are athletes that have diabetes. There are, Supreme Court judges. There's people we need to let people know you can live your life fully as diabetic patient, getting it controlled. Then there's nothing that limits you to do whatever you want once diabetes is under control, and the risk of complications is so much lowered.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all your great information. And, I can't say enough about your enthusiasm.
Thanks, I know.
And your passion. That is absolutely awesome. Now, people want to find you. And if they want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Thanks for asking. My basic website is Dr. Morstein, Morstein. So that's got a lot of information and has the connection to my clinic, Arizona Integrative Medical Solutions. I am in Tempe, Arizona. I do video conferencing with patients around the world. But drmorstein.com is I would say, the launching point for easily getting a hold of me or reading more about me. Also, check out my book, Master Your Diabetes. You can buy it on Amazon. It's 560 pages of just an awesome resource of everything regarding diabetes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And what we will do is we'll put a link directly on our website for our viewers to be able to connect and to be able to order some of these wonderful things that you have and even your services. And thank you so, so much. And let's wish everyone a healing day in their life.
Thank you, Cheryl. Again, thanks for letting me be part of your summit. I really appreciate it.